The first session today is a lecture on Veer Savarkar and the early revolutionary movement in India. Dr. Vikram Sampath, historian and fellow of the Royal Historical Society, we now invite you on stage.
Very good morning, everyone. It's really wonderful to see so many of you on a Saturday morning at 9:30 for a history class. This was usually the time when most of us would doze off and not bunk the class for sure. So it warms my heart to see all of you here. We start off today's proceedings with a very important subject of discussion. And what better place to do it than Pondicherry, which has also the association with Savarkar and the topic that I'm going to talk about, considering Sri Aurobindo, his compatriot in the revolutionary movement before he moved to Pondicherry and branched off into the spiritual realm. But the early revolutionary movement was where all of these people came together, whether it was in Maharashtra and Bengal, the Anushilan Samiti, Swadhin Bharat and other organizations that people like Sri Aurobindo, Barendranath Ghosh, Prafulla Chaki, Khudiram Bose, all of these people were a part of. Coming specifically to Veer Savarkar and his role in the revolutionary movement of India. Now, ordinarily, when you talk of revolution, the way it's been made out is it needs to have a Western and a Marxist, lineage or a context. But luckily, Savarkar was not inspired by Marx or his ideology. It was a combination of two things. One was, of course, the Italian revolutionaries like Joseph Mazzini, Garibaldi, and others, who had a very similar kind of a struggle under Austrian hegemony. You had various princely states in Italy which did not have arms. Then how do you actually procure those arms and fight for your independence? Very similar kind of a structure to what was happening in princely India and British India. The other stream that he drew inspiration from was, of course, the Indic, the Dharmic wing as well, positing right from Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and his call for Hindavi Swarajya and down to all the other, great revolutionaries of the time up to 1857. Savarkar was born in Bhagur, a small village in Nashik on 28th of May 1883, one among three boys, the elder brother Ganesh Damodar, younger brother Narayan Rao and a sister Meena, and in a Chitpavan Brahmin household. Now, this community also had a kind of a unique, speciality, which is exemplified in the letter that the then governor of Bombay Presidency, Sir Richard Temple, had written to the Viceroy of India, Lord Lytton. And he mentions that, this particular community of Chitpavan Brahmins, they were the same ones of the community to which the Peshwa also belonged. And Temple writes that, we think that we took India from the Mughals, but actually we took it from the Marathas. Because for 100 years after the death of Aurangzeb, till 1818, a large part of the subcontinent was under the control of the Marathas, including the Mughal, who was just a puppet in their hands. So Temple writes that this community has such a sense of angst in them that how much ever education we give them, how much ever reforms we bring in, most of them were part of the civil services, they were part of so many organs of the government, they will never be satisfied. They have this militant spirit amongst them that they will only be happy once they return to their original days of glory. And I think his statement was, also justified because many of the reformers, right from Gopal Krishna Gokhale to Bal Gangadhar Tilak to Vishnu Shastri Chiplunkar, many others, they were all belonging to the Chitpavan Brahmin community, as Savarkar also was. and also the revolutionary stream that took forth in Maharashtra, particularly after 1857, fizzled out. You had Vasudev Balwant Phadke, who is called as a father of Indian Revolution, about whom much is not known, and a lot of us would not even know this name. That he was the one in the 1870s who organized the first armed struggle, so to say. After 1857, that was the most significant event. The turning point, particularly in the lives of many revolutionaries, including Savarkar, came in the 1890s when a very devastating plague gripped large parts of India, particularly Maharashtra. In fact, the Epidemics Act that was invoked during the COVID pandemic was also promulgated during this very period by the British. Of course, unlike now, the theme then was not the welfare of the patients or getting them out of the disease, but the commercial interests, because most of the goods that were going to the West, they were being boycotted because people thought even the goods would be infected by the plague virus, and so the British quickly wanted to get rid of this scourge so that their commercial activity could carry on as it was before. And in the process, a lot of repressive measures were adopted by them, including storming into the houses of people. Any news of a dead rat would be concealed from people's the information from anyone, particularly the police, who would always be looking at it. And the people who were infected, they would be ostracized, excommunicated far away from the city to fend all for themselves. So in such a scenario, it was actually Savarkar's father, Damodar Pant Savarkar, his elder brother, all of these were actually acting as volunteers during the plague time, carrying dead bodies, getting it a proper funeral. In the process, actually, his father also contracted plague and died when he was all of 12. At the age of 6, he had lost his mother also. So by 11, 12, he was an orphan. So during this time, there was so much of repression. People were entering, the soldiers were entering the homes, the puja ghars were desecrated, women were molested. And there was a lot of angst about that, even in the Kesari and other publications. Tilak had said, who is that brave, son of a mother who would actually take revenge about all of these measures that are happening in Maharashtra? And the answer came in the form of 3 young brothers, the Chafekar Bandhus, who decided that enough was enough, we will pick the gun. And they again exemplified what Temple had said, because they were English educated. They had, a good enough position in society. But despite that, this angst that the Chitpavan Brahmin community had, as he had mentioned, was something that manifested even in their actions. So they picked up the gun, and Walter Rand, the plague commissioner of Pune, he was assassinated along with his assistant, Charles Irst. Now this sent shockwaves all over Maharashtra. It was the first major, assassination attempt of a British officer right in the presidency. Of course, the Chafekars were rounded up and they were executed, and there were lots of fairy tales about how they went to the gallows with a smile on their lips and with verses of the Gita, that they were uttering as they were being executed. And little Savarkar, who was just all of 11 or 12 then, was seeing all of this, and I think it created a deep impact on his mind. And in the middle of the night, he goes in front of the family deity, the Ashtabhuja Bhavani, the 8-handed Bhavani, and in Marathi, he takes a oath in front of the goddess, saying, Shatrus Marta Marta Mare to Zunzain. Till my last breath, I am going to keep fighting with the enemy and killing him, not dying myself, but actually killing him. And what seemed like a childish vow, which someone took just because, you were influenced by seeing what was happening around, he actually followed it up with concrete action as well, by forming what was India's first ever organized secret society, what initially was called the Rashtra Bhakta Samuha, or the community of Indian patriots. So it was just a very small group of people who would ostensibly meet for discussions on various topics around society, on history, culture, and all of that. But a core group was sought to be formed from amidst them, which actually looked at liberation for India. And we're talking of not even the turn of the century, the 20th century. a lot of Savarkar, by then, as a young man, he was also a precocious reader, which his father had inculcated in him. A lot of Indian books as well as Western philosophy. And he was very inspired, of course, as I said, by the Italian revolutionaries, but along with that also by Thomas Frost. Thomas Frost has written this beautiful book on the secret societies of Europe. And one of the common features of these secret societies were they would all assemble in stealth. They would have passwords and code words to communicate with each other. And there were some rites of passage as to how you could actually become a member of this society. And very similar, if you actually map the activities of the Rashtrabhakta Samuha when it started off, it was very, very similar. They used to have code words like Ram Hari. So if somewhere in the market someone is saying, today Ram and Hari are meeting at the Chai Ka Adda, that means today evening you're going to have a meeting of the revolutionaries in a little rickety room on the first floor of one of the members, far away from the main road. It's still there actually in Nashik, in this narrow lanes of the Tilbhandeshwar temple that is there. And on the first floor, they had decked up the entire room with photographs, right from Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, who was right at the center, to all the other, 1857 heroes, whether it was Rani Lakshmi Bai, Tantya Tope and others, Nana Sahib Peshwa, and the Vasudev Balwant Phadke, the Chafekar brothers, and they were positing themselves as the rightful inheritors of this legacy of armed revolution that was going on in Maharashtra and in India per se. And the right to passage there was a mythical sword of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, which was placed there, and all of them had to offer arghya to it and take this oath that I so and so will not rest till the time the crown of freedom is placed on the head of my mother. And in fact, the only copy of that oath also, I actually found it in the British Library in London, because most of the people used to destroy it here so that they can evade police arrest or raids or whatever was happening. So in fact, if you go to Nasik and go to this place, you will still see this place as it was. Those photographs maintained there, some of the seditious literature of the revolutionaries which are still in that tiny little room. Of course, the biggest irony is if you come out of the room, the circle that is there is called Nehru Chowk. Even in the place where Savarkar started the first secret society of India, even that is not named as Savarkar Chowk, but actually named after somebody else, as most other things in this country have gotten named. So it was here that the first seeds of revolution were actually sown by this man, following up on what would have seemed like a very, very childish act of taking an oath in front of the idol of the goddess, family deity. Now, over the next couple of years, by then it is 1900, the turn of the century, this little organization started spreading its tentacles across Maharashtra first. From hardly 4 or 5 members, it soon grew into an organization of about 70, 80, 100 members. The name also changed. They decided to do it as a two-ended organization, a front-end organization, the Rashtrabhakta Samuha, and then the Mitra Mela, or the association of friends, which would be the core group of people who would then be a part. Young men who were dedicated to the cause of freedom, who were not hesitant to even lay down their lives for the cause that they thought so dear. So this was started for some time. The membership started growing. Now, importantly, the way the revolutionary movement is depicted in our history textbooks as we were growing up, it is shown as random acts of bravery of a few young men here and there, misguided, hot-blooded, Joshile Jawans who would just pick up a gun, shoot somebody, throw a bomb, assassinate, and then be executed. But these were not random acts of madness which were happening in isolation. There was a strategy behind what they wanted to do. And interestingly, there was also coordination across India. Now, at a time when there was no WhatsApp groups where they could easily communicate with each other, just imagine that in Western India, Maharashtra revolutionaries communicating constantly across the country with East India, where Aurobindo and so many others were leading the movement there and forming these links and groups. And what was the end, objective, or how did they want to get to that? The inspiration again was the 1857 revolution, where the revolutionary movement, right from 1857 to 1946, the unending stream that we had from the uprising in 1857 to the naval mutiny in Bombay in 1946, the philosophy was the same, that if you instigate a rebellion, an insurrection in the British Indian Army, that is the only way that the strength of the Raj would come down. Now, even at the peak of the Second World War, or towards the end of the Second World War, there were about 2.5 million soldiers in the British Indian Army, out of which there were only 40,000 who were European. The rest of them were Indians of Indian origin, color, skin color, blood, all of that. Now, after all, even when General Dyer shot at those hapless victims at Jallianwala Bagh, he may have been giving the orders, but the people who executed it were all our, Indian brothers. So the revolutionary idea was that even among this large group of Indians in the army, if 10%, 15% of them could be seduced to patriotism and create an uprising as the 1857 heroes wanted to do, then the Raj would come crashing down. And eventually, if you see the march of history and also the way India actually got freedom, the heroics of the INA and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, later on inspiring the naval mutiny, that was exactly what people, eventually did. That is, instigate this rebellion in the army. They may have failed at various, stages, but the ultimate strategy was that. And that is what these revolutionaries were discussing. Now, this organization, the Mitra Mela, also grew. It became, later on, he renamed it as Abhinav Bharat, or Young India. Again, drawing from Mazzini, Young Italy that he had, similar thing here. And by 1904, they had almost 200 members. From that small little room, it had grown into such a big movement with so many people from all over India, largely Maharashtra then, but even neighboring, Indore, Hyderabad, Gwalior, all the Maratha Confederacy states also somehow participating in this entire activity. And his elder brother, Baba Rao, who incidentally wanted to become a sannyasi, give up his family life and take up sannyas under Swami Vivekananda, he also gets drawn into the revolutionary movement. And when Savarkar moves to Pune to study at the Ferguson College, Baba Rao becomes the front end in Nasik. So each of them were handling different responsibilities of the organization itself. And from 1904, the revolutionaries started meeting at various Congress conferences, whether it was in Calcutta, Surat, and different places. So in the morning, they would all appear like gentlemen who were sitting as delegates in the conference. By night, literally underground movement, where by night they would all meet and strategize, saying when do we have the next big attack. And Savarkar's writings too of that time, they talk very clearly that we need to have low intensity, trouble all the time, simmering all the time in different parts of India, so that the administration is distracted, it is kept busy trying to quell all of this, and at that time we will all gather and create that one big bomb which will blow up the whole of the country through the army, and that is what will get us freedom. So this was what they were trying to do. And even if you see later in the 1910s, during the First World War, the Gadar movement, which the Gadarites did, that was also something similar of wanting to insurrect the army. So they were meeting like this and so on. And in 1905, by then you had the partition of Bengal and Lord Curzon doing what he did. And look at the resonance that something in Bengal across the country created so much of fervor in Maharashtra that mass protests were organized against it by the Abhinav Bharat. And under Tilak's guidance, Savarkar organized again India's first ever bonfire of foreign clothes, student bonfire of foreign clothes. When we talk of bonfire, the image comes only of Gandhi and him doing this, but the actual first bonfire was done at that time while he was a student, and for which he also faced rustigation from the college. The principal, Wrangler Paranjpe, who is a Anglophile, first Wrangler from Cambridge University, incidentally also one of the Congress presidents. So we know who are the people who were in the Congress who are also that were very close to the British administration and also beneficiaries of the British system, whether it was in education or otherwise. He rusticated Savarkar, and he was also fined about 100 rupees or something and thrown out of the college. But the struggle continued. Around that time, you had this great colossus of the revolutionary movement, Shyamji Krishna Varma, who again was a scholar of great repute, someone who had done his Sanskrit honors from Oxford and Cambridge. He served as a diwan in several princely states in India, got disillusioned, and then moved away to Europe and decided to organize the movement from there. Now, one may ask, why do you have to go all the way to Europe to do the liberation movement of India? And the reason for that was the sedition laws in India were so strong, like they are now perhaps, that any little bit of anti-government propaganda you could be put in Kalapani, in Port Blair. Whereas their anti-government, anti-British literature movements were still allowed right in the heart of the empire. So a lot of these people went there and they thought, we will organize revolutionaries from there. And Shyamji was giving fellowships and scholarships to nationalistic students who could come there ostensibly to kind of study and so on, but secretly organize all of this. So Savarkar got the Shivaji scholarship, which Tilak actually recommended him for, and goes away to London in 1905 to study law at the Gray's Inn in London. And those 5 years that he was there were stormy years, where I think the seeds of the Indian revolutionary movement actually took shape right there. And so many others who were there with him. Shyamji Krishna Varma, of course. There was Madam Bhikaji Kama, that fiery, Parsi woman from Bombay, who had also, moved over to the revolutionary side from Dadabhai Nauroji, with whom she was working with. There was Virendranath Chattopadhyay, who was Sarojini Naidu's brother. A very, very interesting, character himself. Many of these, VVS Iyer, who was there, who later came to Pondicherry and settled down here after the movement unraveled in London. MPT Acharya, Mysore Iyengar from Karnataka. There was Sikandar Hayat Khan. So it was like a microcosm of India. The India House that it was there, it's still there at Highgate in London. And whatever we in India may call Savarkar, the blue plaque that the London corporation puts there for monuments of historical importance, it says Indian patriot and philosopher Vinayak Damodar Savarkar lived here. So we may call him whatever we want, but the British municipality still terms him as the Indian patriot and philosopher who lived there. So in fact, a lot of it's actually not a government property; it's a private house. So many Indians actually go there and take selfies and all of that. And I think those inmates are really irritated by the fact that someone is almost encroaching their property all the time. So even when I, with a friend, went to Highgate, I said, oh my God, these are the people who have come again to take a photograph of our, house. But that was the hotbed of sedition. And what did Savarkar do sitting there in those 5 years? One is, of course, he was the leader, unsaid leader of the entire group. But he started putting an intellectual corpus to the revolutionary movement, precisely what it should not be, that it's a mindless activity of crazy people throwing bombs here and there. So the first act was to translate the works of Joseph Mazzini into Marathi and to give a prescription as to how do you lead the revolutionary movement in India. And then over 2 years, 1908 to 1909, he researched original documents from the British Library in London to give India and Indians a new history written from their own perspective. And I think that was one of his major contributions of using history as a tool to inspire and instigate people into the act of revolution. And he may probably have never wielded a gun in his life, but it really warms the heart of a writer and among fellow writers in a literature festival that he was deemed so dangerous despite the fact that he did not wield a gun. The pen was certainly mightier than the sword in this case. And in those 2 years, as I said, he researched about 1857, which was hitherto dismissed as, a sepoy mutiny. Small little incident, some sepoys, they protested and we executed them. That's how the British wanted to disparage it. but he studied the documents and called it the first war of Indian independence. That he said this cannot be just a chutput ghatna that this greased cartridges. That's what we are told, those beef and pork lard, because of which they had to bring it to their mouth, and then that's what got the Hindus and Muslims agitated. But he says such a large revolution that went from Peshawar to Calcutta, it cannot be just by some small incident like this. There were two major, according to him, principles of this revolution: a quest for Swarajya and Swadharma. So not only getting autonomy, political autonomy, but it was also, there was a cultural and religious component of Swadharma. These, according to him, were the two main reasons why both communities, Hindus and Muslims, actually came together in the 1857 revolution. And interestingly, and we're talking about a book in a literature festival, this was the first book in the world which was probably banned before it was published. Even before it was published, because Lord Minto, the Viceroy, had very clearly in his jotting says this manuscript that this man is writing in London should not be allowed to come to the shores of India. So the Sea Customs Act, the Post Office Act, a lot of those colonial rules were employed to ensure that this doesn't even come to India. But a book on history has a very interesting history of itself, because the way these revolutionaries would operate and send these things to India is very, very interesting. So in these double barrel boxes with a false bottom, at the bottom there would be these manuscripts, sometimes the gun, the grenade or whatever. And on the top there would be something very, very innocuous and very, looking very harmless. Pickwick papers, Christmas presents and all of that. And this would escape customs across countries and then be smuggled back to India. So this book too, the manuscript was sent from London to Baba Rao, who took it to a printing press in Sholapur. Now the police got to know about it. They raided the printing press. So he had to withdraw the manuscript, sent it back like that in stealth back to London. Then they sent it to France to publish it. The French police got, news about it. So there was a chapa that happened on the press there too. So it was withdrawn from there. Then they decided to send it to Germany, because Germany had a lot of Indology work. So they probably knew the Devanagari script. It was written in Marathi. So, but there too, the person who was typesetting it created a whole mess of it. So they withdrew it from there. Then it went to Belgium. And Belgium was where finally this book was, printed. VVS Iyer got it translated into English, and then copies were made into multiple Indian languages and sent back to India, again smuggled like this. And this was again, it became the Bhagavad Gita for revolutionaries for decades to come. Bhagat Singh and Sukhdev and Rajguru, it is a documented fact in the Nehru Memorial, now Prime Minister Museum and Library rather. There is an oral archive which talks about one of the revolutionaries who says that when he was recruited in the movement by Bhagat Singh, he was asked by Bhagat Singh and Sukhdev that what are the books you read? Because they wanted to know what the young people are reading. And when he said a few names, he said, have you read Savarkar's 1857 book? Have you read The Life of Barrister Savarkar by Chitragupta? So these were very important books which even Bhagat Singh considered as the entry criteria, so to say, into the HSRA. And he got actually the third edition of the book published as well. And much later, you had Rash Bihari Bose, who published translations of it, including in Japanese. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, in INA raids, copies of this book were found with the revolutionaries in languages ranging from Tamil to Japanese. So this little book which he wrote in 2 years, not so little, it was quite a bulky book about the entire revolution, as I said, served as an inspiration for so many people for so many decades. And that's what the intellectual corpus that he was giving to all of them. Now, along with that, India by then had the Rowlatt Act. Indians could not have arms. So you needed to arrange for arms. So one more activity that these people wanted to do was to smuggle arms and also the whole knowledge of creating, manufacturing bombs. Now the bomb manual that was there was doing the rounds in France, that there was somebody who had a bomb manual. Now Savarkar dispatched Hemchandra Das Kanungo of the Anushilan Samiti and also Senapati Bapat, Pandurang Mahadev Bapat, to go there. Again, Bengal and Maharashtra working in coordination with each other to go and find out about this particular bomb manual. And they go all over to France. Again, it's like an Alfred Hitchcock movie where all the time, the police is behind them. They're shifting from one hotel to the other so that they are not discovered. Finally, a Russian professor tells them that there is a copy of this bomb manual, and lo and behold, they find a copy of that with a Russian tailor. Of all the people, a tailor has a bomb manual. Now, Hemchandra is a great photographer, so he takes photographs of all of this. Later, they realize that the whole damn thing is in Russian. So, Kala Akshar Bhains Barabar, how do you make anything out of this 70-page document in Russian? And Senapati Bapat is supposed to have had a German girlfriend called Anna Claus, who was doing her MBBS in Berlin. So the revolutionaries also, had a very colorful life. It was not just all the time bombs and so on. They had also European girlfriends and all of that. So they go there, and this lady took 6 months, slow and tardy, to kind of translate that whole thing from Russian to English. And then that was further translated into multiple Indian languages, to Marathi, to Bengali, and smuggled back in the same manner to different parts of India. And copies of this manual was what was found with the people of the Alipur bomb case, the Maniktola case, in which Sri Aurobindo was also implicated, and a copy with Tilak, and a copy also in Nashik, where Anant Lakshman Kanhere, a young man, had actually picked up the gun, made a bomb, and also killed the commissioner of Nashik, Jackson. The British by then were petrified that what the hell is happening? All over bombs are going around, and we need to trace the root cause of this. In India, raids all over India were conducted. Of course, the Alipur trial was also done, where Sri Aurobindo and several others were imprisoned. Barin Ghosh was tried. Khudiram Bose was hanged. All of that happened in Bengal. Baba Rao was also tried, and he was sent away to Kalapani in Port Blair. But they knew that the root cause of this was not in India. It was somewhere else, sitting somewhere else. And they were trying desperately to see where is all this emanating from. And a rude shock came to them when, right in the heart of the empire, in London, under the Queen's nose, you had an Indian who committed an assassination. That was Madan Lal Dhingra, a very, very brave patriot, a young man from Punjab, who was initially, given to all kinds of pleasures. He was not even interested, but he came so much under the spell of Savarkar that he decided, almost, in a sense of comatose, that he is going to lead this. And there was one Curzon Wiley, who was conducting surveillance on all the Indian students who were in London. Now, how did, even the British government in India know that Savarkar was writing a manuscript on 1857? Because constantly there was surveillance on the India House. The Scotland Yard detectives would be roaming all around. They would bribe some of the inmates saying, can you tell us what's happening? What are the meetings? What goes on? So all the time they were living in such stress that someone is going to know what you're going to do. So Curzon Wiley was leading this entire thing. So Madan Lal Dhingra decided he'll get a gun. He actually practiced shooting short range, long range, all of that over several months. And finally, in the middle of a party in London, which Curzon Wiley had called for all Indian students, he goes to greet him and point blank shoots Curzon Wiley. And so you can imagine the horror that not only in British India, but right inside the empire, with Scotland Yard, with the police, with the, all of the paraphernalia, an Indian man had managed to kill a very senior British officer. And that sent alarm bells ringing, and they wanted to catch this and unravel the entire movement at any cost. And then, as they were tracing the dots, they realized the root cause of this was this puny little man, with a specs, very nerdy looking. He was the one who was the kingpin of this entire project. And they realized that at any cost, this has to be nipped in the bud. Otherwise, this is going to, move forward. And by then, also, some other things were happening in the India House. Madam Bhikaji Kama, along with Sardar Singh Rana, one of the other revolutionaries, they had gone to the International Socialist Conference at Stuttgart in Germany in 1908, where Savarkar and Hemchandra Das Kanungo had designed the first flag of Indian independence with Vande Mataram written on it. And this was unfurled at the conference. The British tried their best to scuttle Madam Kama from unfurling this, but she just hopped onto the table, jumped, and then, unfurled the flag and said, from today, India is free, no matter what you people do. So, this was at a time when, very interestingly, the revolutionaries were asking for not small little concessions, but they were asking for a complete liberation of India, total independence. Even the Congress, whether it was the moderate section or the so-called extremist section, Lal Bal Pal, they were not really asking for freedom. They were asking for concessions, cooperative, kind of resistance, and some little, this thing in the judiciary, in the legislature, give us some concessions and we will be mollified. But it was only the revolutionary movement in India, which right from 1905 was pressing for total liberation. The Purna Swaraj, call by the Congress also came 25 years later in 1930. So that is very interesting and important to note what the objective of the revolutionaries was vis-a-vis the other speakers, other people. Now, of course, as I said, they wanted to unravel it. The people, even Savarkar moves away to Paris briefly, where Shamji and Madam Kama and others are there. And that is where, he's really, really frustrated because Madan Lal Dhingra is caught and executed. The movement literally unravels by 1909, 1910. And there on the banks of the shores of the ocean in Brighton, in England, with Niranjan Pal, the son of Bipin Chandra Pal, who's there, he sees the ocean, and then he's also a sensitive poet, a very, very strange combination of a firebrand revolutionary who's also a sensitive poet. He is supposed to have just broken down in tears and said, and composed that very famous Marathi poem then, Ne Majasi Ne Parat Matra Bhumila Sagara Pran Tadmalala. What is the use of all this education? He chides the ocean and says, oh ocean, you brought me all this way to England with the promise that I can use this to liberate my mother. When my mother back home is sitting in such torturous times, I am sitting here and enjoying all these luxuries of life. What use of this education? Prana Tadamalala. The soul is actually, dwindling with, anguish. So that was the famous poem, which of course, Hridainath Mangeshkarji tuned, which Lataji, Ashaji and all the sisters sang, for which of course, Hridainath Mangeshkar also lost his job in the All India Radio in those great hallowed decades of Nehruvian tolerance and freedom of expression. So that was when he decided that he's going to come back to London. But the minute he came back to London from Paris, he says, I'll face the consequences. He was arrested at the railway station itself. An unfair trial was later, it followed, where he was not even given the choice of having a lawyer, no jury, none of it. So it was a fixed match, and the British at any cost wanted him sent back, extradited to India. Because as I said, if it was India, the charges he could be accused of could lead him to a life of incarceration in Port Blair. Whereas in London, this would be normal. He would just probably be let off after a few years of prison time. So at any cost, if you see even Churchill, who was the Home Secretary, he writes in most of the official documents that Britain at no cost should allow this man to be on European soil. He needs to be extradited because he was categorized as a D category or a dangerous category criminal. And so they had this trial against him. He was, of course, sent away to India. And even then, when he was being sent back in the ship, which went to India, when the ship docked for a little at Marseille in France, the entire scene is also very, very interesting, where in the ship, he's constantly under surveillance. There are two Indian British soldiers who are sitting there, keeping guard of him, a British sergeant, everyone. And whatever he did, even going to the toilet in the morning, that was being monitored. in the midst of that, in those few minutes that the ship was docking at Masai, he goes into the toilet, opens the porthole of the toilet and jumps out into the ocean, swims a few miles and gets onto French soil. And that creates, a huge international dispute, which goes even to the International Court of Justice in Hague. Just like we had, India and Pakistan going to Hague for one of our army members. So similar thing happened then, where his, view as an astute lawyer was, I have now entered French soil. So the British have lost their control over me. Now it is up to the France government to give me asylum or not. And France, if it has to live up to all its hallowed ideals of liberty, equality, fraternity, and its support to the revolutionary movement, it needs to take a call. So this led to so much of clash between England and France. The Prime Minister in France had to resign because of the massive political, debates that went on after that. But Britain was so resolute that they literally, forced the hands of France. They won the case at Hague, and Savarkar was extradited, of course, to Kalapani, where he was tried again for the Nashik murder case in India, and he was probably given the largest kind of duration of punishment, 2 transportations for life. 25 years plus 25 years, that is 50 long years of transportation. A young man who had gone to London to study law at the age of 26 or 27 to be slapped by this for 50 years. And the Gale ka patta that was there on all of them had the year 1960 written on it. So that every day you're looking at it, it was 1910 when this was given to him. Every day you know that only at 1960 I'm going to come out of this jail. And of course, I don't know how much time do I have? Last 5 minutes. I'll open it for questions for the last 5 minutes. So this almost ends the revolutionary side of Savarkar, but of course he had huge consequences to face for this. The physical suffering, which I will cover in a minute, but his degrees were confiscated from him. His law degree, his graduation certificate from Ferguson. So on paper, he was just a metric pass. His entire property was confiscated. They came from a zamindari, background. All the property, even the utensils of the house, were taken away. And by then, the elder brother is also in the same Kalapani. Savarkar also goes to Kalapani. The younger brother is trying hard to earn a living by being a doctor. The women of the family, the entire family was ostracized by society, saying, these are family of criminals and wives of criminals. And they literally had to, with no utensils to even cook, to then actually, survive by beggary, by the charity that people gave. Bhikaji Kama used to send money from France for the upkeep of the family. So that was a sacrifice that, even the family of these revolutionaries paid. And of course, in Kalapani, we all know the kind of tortures, even the basic human rights, human facilities of good food or toilet facilities being not given to them. The food that was given was mostly filled with pieces of reptiles. It was basi khana, so eating that, most of them would end up with diarrhea. And there were fixed times to go to the loo. So if you wanted to have diarrhea and you wanted to go midway, you were not allowed. So most of these prisoners, the revolutionaries, had to defecate and urinate in their own cells which were so small that if you stood up, you hit the roof. So for months together, you had standing handcuffs, where again, you urinated there and all of that. And to sit, eat, sleep amidst your own squalor. Even Aurobindo's brother Barin Ghosh suffered all of this. The Kolhu Ka Bail punishment, where in the blazing heat of Port Blair, the revolutionary was yoked to the grinding mill, and he had to extract 30 pounds of oil. And if you did not, you were flogged. So all these kind of tortures that they faced in Port Blair, which today we so happily forget, sitting in the cozy comforts of air-conditioned rooms, some politicians, for their petty politics and purposes, go on nation-joining yatras and then talk and, disparage somebody as being a stooge, somebody who sold out to the British and all of that. I think it one should really put a moratorium on that, because people like this, particularly the revolutionary movement, so many of them, none of the Congress men were ever sent to Kalapani, and that says a story of its own. Why were only revolutionaries sent there to suffer the most? So today, for petty politics, I do hope that history, and particularly blue blood, patriots like all of this, who's not only them but their entire family suffered, they should be kept out of the realm of the dirty electoral, tutu meme that happens every day. So thank you so much. I'll open it up for some questions. One question or two questions if time permits.
Hi. Vineet here. I had a question. You mentioned that the aim of the revolutionaries was that to inspire the people, especially in the military, then to do a mutiny, right? Mm-hmm. And the most famous one is the naval mutiny that happened in the 40s.
Right.
But from 1905 till the 1940s, were there any mutinies, or why did there, at least to the extent I have read, there wasn't any? Why wasn't there any thing in the military? Was there any activity or action? Did it inspire soldiers? Any isolated incidents of rebellion or anything like that?
So there were incidents of mutiny because, as I said, in the First World War period, you had the entire Gadar movement, and the Gadarites were inspired. Lala Hardayal, who was also staying with Savarkar at the India House, who later, after the movement unraveled in London, goes away to America, America, Canada, Europe, all of them, intercontinental activity to do this. And one of the things that, with the help of Germany, even during the First World War, the idea was to invade British India, both through land and through sea. Land through the Afghanistan route, sea through the Thailand, that side, and also attack Port Blair, release all the revolutionaries who were holed up there. So they were aborted attempts at instigating mutinies all through. But before that, they had to create a general unrest in the British domains, which is what they tried to do through bombs and assassinations, which even Bhagat Singh and all of them did. So the attempts were aborted or unsuccessful, but it was always tried. In fact, in 1914 or 15, you had Raja Mahendra Pratap Singh, a scion of one of the royal families, who becomes India's first provisional prime minister in exile in Germany. So the Kaiser of Germany actually recognizes his role, and he says, from today, India is independent, and this is the new prime minister. So Germany was an active collaborator. I don't know what the impact would have been. Would we have become a German colony? That's a question we need to ask. But the attempts were always there. The fruition of all these attempts was undoubtedly the INA, what Rash Bihari Bose and then Netaji did.
I have one.
Thank you so much. I'm anyway around, so we can catch up. Thank you.